Okay, hi everyone. My name is Tatiana, and we're going to be doing a C2C. So I've been with SFC for a couple years now, and I'm really excited to have this interview.
Hi everyone, I'm Brayden Day Chief. I'm also with SFC. I've been with them for about a month now, and I've helped them with the outreach program and Canadians, and it's great to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'll start with my first question for you is which resources did you grow up knowing a lot about or having a lot of exposure to, and which do you think people should be more educated about?
Um, well, tell you the truth, I didn't grow up knowing much about Alberta's resources, which I was exposed to every day. We didn't have much information about any of Alberta's resources, such as oil and gas. As Indigenous people, we are taught at a very young age that our Mother Earth is the source of life and to care for the land and treating the land with respect as it is a member of your own family. So, my people who are Nitsitabi, which is real people in Blackfoot, we have always had a connection with the land, a unique spiritual bond with the environment. And before the newcomers, the Blackfoot's main resource was the buffalo. The Blackfoot used their environment for their basic necessities of their lifestyles. Hunting was more than an economic activity for the Blackfoot people, so they relied heavily on the buffalo for food production, clothing materials, certain tools, for their structures and shelters. And today, the buffalo are nearly extinct due to the colonization of the settlers. But now we all live in homes like modern Canadians, and we all rely heavily on oil and gas. And both oil and gas is used for cars, heaters, cooking, everything we use basically. And we use it in our everyday lives and sometimes forget how important it is to human life and Alberta's economy. So I think we need to be educated more about oil and gas, and Alberta has to be very careful because both are non-renewable natural resources, meaning once we finish all our oil and gas, it will all be gone, like the buffalo. So in this modern world, both indigenous and non-indigenous people require natural resources to maintain their survival, and everyone today uses energy, plastic, wood, metals, and other products to reduce sustainability in their livelihoods.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I really appreciate that.
So, what are some of the benefits that can come out of natural resource development?
I think a lot, honestly. I think you can kind of look at it from a bunch of different, I guess, schemes or scopes. I mean, for me, obviously coming from an environmental studies background, I would look first at the environmental aspect of it. I think having natural resource production in Canada, first of all, is so great for the environment a lot more than if we were just getting everything from other places because there's a lot less transit that goes into having to ship things, having to, bring that over and have a lot more emissions coming out of that. So that one obviously is an impact on the environment of us taking into our own hands, making things here and kind of lessening or shortening that, I guess, transit period. I think another reason as well is that I know Canada has a lot of really good standards, like high environmental standards for a lot of our resources. Sometimes, a lot of the times, a lot higher than some other places that we would ship from. So I think, when it comes to renewables and non-renewables, I mean, obviously we know that we're transitioning to renewable energy and hoping to get more and more sustainable and regenerative every single day. And so I think when it comes to resources that are non-renewable, like oil and gas, like you mentioned, those kind of things, I think obviously ideally it'd be nice to be able to transition completely to a point where we don't have to use those things and we can have everything renewable, but it's not that simple and we still need so many of those resources in order to make the things that we want to be renewable, right? Even like with wind turbines, to make those you need mining to get get those products. So I think in the interim time, using those resources that we know are high environmentally, I guess, standardized in that meantime, I think is a really good thing for the environment. And also it's just great for people, I think, as well, just because we, supporting local and supporting Canadian families and livelihoods and that kind of thing, while knowing that we're doing the best we can with what we have, I think is just an overall good position to be in. So yeah.
Thank
So,
you for that.
yeah, thank you. So, my next question for you is, what are your biggest concerns about industry and resources in today's day and age? And in your opinion, do you think there's a good balance between the well being of the environment and resource development?
So, my biggest concern is that there aren't enough partnerships or interaction between the resource industries and indigenous communities. And if we look at the history of indigenous people and natural resources, at the very beginning, we were Canada's first entrepreneurs. We had our own trade routes. We traded medicines, our furs, our technology, and knowledge systems with the newcomers. And now it's becoming more apparent is that these days, especially in our indigenous communities, are actually becoming more primary producers of Canada's natural resources. We have partnerships in mining now, the oil and gas sector, the energy sector, hydro development, and even the nuclear development. Our people are proliferating now and becoming more in tune to the economy. But in a modern context, I think there needs to be more alliances or partnerships between natural resource industries and Indigenous organizations and Indigenous communities. In today's age, Canada is going to need its Indigenous lens to make sure the areas from development are protected. But as keeping these areas protected, also make sure our rights and our areas are respected as well. So we can continue doing the things that are foundational to being an Indigenous person, and that is our connection to a healthy land. And Indigenous people, as I said before, have a strong, unique relationship to their traditional territories. And in this modern age, I believe Indigenous communities should prosper off their land's natural resources and become self sufficient. This type of development in these communities can bring so many opportunities, and the community members will have improved income sources, which can lead to a greater economy. A greater economy can lead Indigenous people away from depending on the governments for financial support. And this alternative for securing financial wellness can provide a greater quality for life for Indigenous people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100% agree with that. Such a good answer.
So thank you. What are some of the challenges that can come out of natural resource development, and what can we do to address these challenges?
Hmm. I think there's, I mean, again, I'll go from the environmental standpoint. I think that with any resource development, with any, I guess, just production of something in general, there's always going to be an offset. There's always going to be some kind of impact one way or another, right? Even if it's renewables, that's, there are still a lot of environmental impacts from creating solar panels. It's just in a different way. It's not the same as, for example, oil and gas, which is more of on an emission side. There's always going to be an offset or an impact on the environment or an impact on people, on indigenous communities. There's always that kind of offset with things. It's never just one or the other. And so I think that when it comes to, let's say, environmental impacts from resource development, I think obviously it's not something that we can avoid. And I wish, I mean, I think the more sustainable and the more regenerative we get, I think we can try and mitigate those things as well as we possibly can. And I'm of the opinion that I think human beings, we're not aside from nature. We are a part of nature. We are nature, and I think that living harmoniously with nature and learning how to give back what we take out of it and not have it just be like we're humans on top of the earth, but no, we should be living with the earth in unison with it and giving back and being those stewards. I think to me is just such, and it just such a, I guess, a really ingrained part of human beings in their nature. So I think that maybe having that approach when it comes to resource development a lot more, especially in Western, in the more corporate modern world. I think a lot of people really have to start thinking about how we can do things as not just using and taking, but actually how can we reintegrate ourselves within the cycle, so it's not just depleting, it's not just taking something and then letting the side effects just go. It's about actually learning about ecosystems and learning how we can actually work with that and be part of that, so it's not as systematically damaging and it's more long-term healing. You know what I mean? So that's, yeah, I think that's kind of it's definitely an abstract notion, but I think that's a really integral part of healing those issues, is just really understanding where we come from and understanding that that's the best way to have a balance between people and the environment, is that we are part of that environment, So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just loved how you said your balance with the environment. It's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So my last question for you: how do you think we can better bridge the gap between differing worldviews to have better conversations, like less polarizing, especially between Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous, with reconciliation in mind?
Well, I do understand that there are indigenous communities that are opposed to natural resource development, and their concerns are important. Everyone deserves to have their opinion or message heard. They're environmentalists with concerns such as oil leaks polluting the air. They're worried that these developments could damage the land and water in these communities. And both opinions are important, whether you encourage and approve of natural resource development or you're against it. We need to take both opinions into consideration. And only way we can do that is if we sit across from each other and start talking about those concerns. And if both parties don't talk, the problem will perpetuate. And I understand that there's not enough communication, and I think that needs to be changed. Because by understanding each other and building those relationships and look to the future at how best we can move forward. So we need to hear from those that are concerned about resource development. Let's hear from those who are opposing and from those that are in favor. Because I believe somewhere in the middle of those conversations, we will all meet and agree with each other. I firmly believe everybody has concerns, and like I said, they need to be heard. We also need to be transparent about it, but we also need to make sure it's community driven. Like the revenues from the economic and resource development can help so many people in indigenous communities by raising the standard of living, the ability to take care of your family, the ability to be dependent from a system that has kept indigenous people in a place where they're never meant to succeed. So when it comes to creating alliances with indigenous communities and non-indigenous organizations, this also creates an opportunity to get to know each other, to build those business relationships, and from those business relationships become friendships. And there's now that moral understanding. And there are alliances I know of already, but I think there's not enough interaction, I think, yet to address a lot of the challenges our country is facing and the rapid racism towards indigenous people. And when these organizations start to understand that we're all about meaningful relationships and the partnerships, I've been around indigenous leaders who do have a voice in the natural resource industry, and I learned that when they do business together, they face challenges together. And when they face challenges together, they emerge out of those challenges with solutions as a team. And I think as young Canadians, that is something we need to build on.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, thank you for that answer. And I think that your mention of just the word meaningful, I think, is a really important word, because I think that having like actual meaningful connection and collaboration is just, it's so crucial. So yeah, I really like that answer.
So this is also my last question for you as well. Um, do you think indigenous communities and resource development companies can be good partners?
100%. Yeah, I think 100%. I think like not only is it possible, I think that it's necessary. I think it's so crucial, and I think when talking about projects or talking about, I guess, like any project or resource development or anything that's involving, the traditional lands and the environment, I think that indigenous communities like absolutely should be at the forefront of those conversations and of those decisions. And I think when it comes to reconciliation and healing those relationships with indigenous communities and Canada's history, you need to have that meaningful connection, you need to have that meaningful collaboration. And I think it's not only the duty of organizations and businesses to want to do that, it should also be something that is just an innate desire, because it's just so meaningful and prosperous in so many different ways, and I think that, like you said, like indigenous communities have a lot of really deeply ingrained connection to the land, and the way that you can use the land for what you need, but also have it in a very sustainable, regenerative way, is something I think a lot of companies and a lot of just people in general in Canada can 100% learn from. Yeah, I think that's just such a wise way of going about life. So I really do think that it's not something that should be an empty conversation. I think that it's something that should have a conversation and then have the actions to follow up with that and be, upholding the desire and upholding that and with integrity. I think comes at the duty of all parties involved, but definitely comes at the duty of the organizations and businesses to really uphold that and uphold that fact that that's something that they really highly value. And I just think that so much good can come out of, like you said, healing those relationships in a meaningful way for the future and for all communities in general. So yeah, I think like 100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. And thank you for joining me today. So that
Yeah, it
concludes
was great.
our interview, but I'm Tatiana and I am with SFC.
I'm Brayden, and I'm also with SFC, and it was lovely to be here. Thank you for Tatiana for inviting me. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.